and mighty ruler of a vast Chinese empire sends his loyal vassal into the uncharted waters, seeking the secret to immortality. As they part ways, the ruler watches with unwavering trust, believing that one day his vassal will return with the answers hidden within the endless expanse of the world. However, he never came back. Days, months, and years passed, even the empire itself fell to dust, but there was no sign of the vassal's return. Over time, his stories and memory faded away, lost to history. Until one day, among the mountains, he finally returned. Bro literally went out for some milk and came back after a whole dynasty collapsed. Now in his old age, he stands at a cliffside with a young companion named Azura beside him. Looking down at the place where the empire once stood, he tells Azura about the mission he was sent on. However, the little one is a bit hungry, so he doesn't really care, making the old-timer mad at him. A bit earlier in a nearby jungle, the girl gets up from the ground, hearing her men yelling at her to take the ghost-faced sword and run. As she looks around, she is shocked to see her captain brutally killed while a monster slaughters what remains of her caravan. It is like a nightmare going on. One of the men tries to retaliate but loses all hope when his sword shatters upon striking the monster's body. The creature munches him down and continues its assault on the remaining men and horses, while their screams echo through the woods. Nearby, the creepy figure sits in a tree, watching the bloodshed with excitement. He's after the ghost-faced sword, but he's taken aback when he spots the girl running away with it. Annoyed but confident, he sends his 2 snakes after her. In a flash, they lunge at her at full speed. Just as they are about to sink their fangs into her, she swings the sword, slicing both of their heads off. However, despite that, one snake's severed head manages to bite her. As she struggles with it, the momentum sends her tumbling over the cliff's edge and she free falls toward the ground. Now in the morning, the old-timer is gazing at the remains of the empire when he notices his young companion approaching with a girl's body. Azura had found her lying near a cliff and, assuming she was dead, brought her to the old man. Her body is in rough shape, but after examining her closely, the old-timer detects a faint pulse. Deciding to help her, partly because they also need a local guide to navigate the area, he takes out a talisman. As he rubs it, the talisman transforms into dragon marrow essence, a powerful remedy for external wounds. The young companion, clueless about what it is, asks the old man, who casually reveals that he got it as a reward from the Sea King. Apparently, he had helped the king's daughter, who had fallen in love with a human knight. Using his surgical expertise, he gave her legs, and in return, the Sea King gifted him the essence, known for its potent healing properties. But what really shocks Azura is that according to the old man, the mermaid lost her voice due to the procedure and, in the end, lost her man because of it. Bro is out here flexing his failure like it's worth plus 1,000 aura points. Stopping the yapping process, they focus on healing the girl, and as soon as they apply the essence, she fully recovers. However, the moment she wakes up, she panics and frantically searches for her ghost-faced sword, while the 2 bystanders are left completely clueless about what's going on. The old man, trying to be the nice guy, gently attempts to calm her down, but she's not having it. Instead, she jumps on him like he just stole her last ramen packet. Meanwhile, the young lad throws in some half-hearted verbal support. The girl literally takes the old-timer hostage, demanding that Azura find her sword or else she'll pop his head off. Meanwhile, the poor old man, with his ancient bones and barely 1 HP left, is out here buffering like a laggy Wi-Fi connection, questioning every life decision that led him to this moment. Despite being furious with her, Azura keeps searching until he finally finds the sword in his horse's mouth. Retrieving it calms the situation down, but just as they prepare to leave, the girl, treating them like hired drivers, orders them to take her to Sky Mist Valley. This enrages the old man, and with the 2 teeth he has left, he screams at her. As their tantrum continues, the same sinister guy who was after the sword finally catches up to them. His name is Sejun, and the moment the girl sees him, she is visibly shocked. The dude, however, watches him climb down from a tree and immediately assume he's some kind of ape or something. From a distance, Sejun warns them to obey him, but they're too far away to hear whatever the hell he's saying. The girl, however, steps forward and urges them to stand behind her, explaining that this is a matter of the martial arts world and she has to handle it herself. Hoping to wield the sword's power, she gets ready, only to realize Azura is already ahead of her, casually confronting Sejun. As she yells at him to get back, she suddenly feels the sword pulsing. Out of nowhere, monstrous dragon snakes slither out from the forest. Sejun orders the serpents to attack, but just as Azura is about to retaliate, the girl panics and throws her sword, hitting him straight in the head. As the old-timer tries to stop her, she shoves him aside, yelling that Azura's weapon is useless against these creatures. Seeing the sword now in the boy's hands, Sejun commands his monsters to strike. However, as Azura unwraps the sword, it suddenly begins shining brightly. With a single swing, he slices the entire serpent clean in half. The girl is left completely stunned. It seems like the sword has chosen him as its master. Meanwhile, as the sword grows larger, Azura starts chomping through the fallen serpent's body until he accidentally swings too hard, hits a rock, and snaps the sword in half. The girl, witnessing this, is absolutely furious, while Seijin, on the other hand, is relieved and immediately sends his remaining serpent to attack. Seeing the situation turning to crap, the girl tries to escape with the carriage, but the old man reminds her that the horse only follows their commands. He tells her to wait until his boy finishes the job. As she's busy committing elder abuse, Seijin is left shocked watching Azura casually dismantle the serpent army with nothing but a wooden staff. And when I say dismantle, I mean one-hit KO. Deleted from existence. Respawn not available. After finishing them off, he sets his sights on Seijin and smacks him so hard he goes crashing into a nearby tree. The girl is left speechless. Meanwhile, the broken sword, now lying in the blood-soaked field, starts trembling. After that, they leave, and the girl, finally realizing her mistakes, apologizes. She introduces herself as Samyang Siak, the head of the Siak clan, and offers to host them at her village in Skymist. The old man, however, clearly dislikes her. But she takes his anger as a yes, and, without waiting for permission, turns the carriage toward her village herself. They eventually agree to take Samyang to Skymist Valley on the condition that after that, they'll go their separate ways. Azura, despite the agreement, starts trash-talking her, and Samyang, never one to back down, fires right back. However, the old-timer jumps in to shut them both up, forcing them to ride ahead in silence. Meanwhile, back at the battlefield, Seijin's group interrogates him, shocked to hear that the legendary ghost-faced sword was broken by just a young boy. Even more surprising, according to Seijin, the boy and the old man weren't affiliated with any clan or guild. Once the interrogation is over, one of the group members, ignoring Seijin's desperate pleas, grabs him by the skull and mercilessly drains his life force. The leader of the group notices the carriage track heading toward Goldwood. As he turns back, he sees that Seijin has been fully absorbed by the other member, who then shrugs and says that Seijin's powers were useless anyway since his snakes were already dead. With zero remorse, they decide to handle the suspicious duo who cause all this mess themselves. Somewhere else, a group of warriors marches into a hotel where Azura and his crew are busy stuffing their faces. The leader of the warrior group approaches the hotel manager and asks if he's seen the moon-faced sword with a girl. The manager denies it but speculates that it might be hidden in the horse cart parked outside. Determined to find out, the warrior orders his men to scatter around the hotel and take all the tables. Because apparently that's just how you investigate things now. While Samyang is busy explaining to the duo about the rules and laws surrounding martial artists, that they're basically free to do whatever they want, the old man, though a bit shocked, hands her a small bag as a parting gift for her information. He claims that the leftover seeds inside might help her cultivate her youth and are way better than her so-called divine sword. The moment they mention the divine sword, the warrior group lurking around perks up. Samyang takes the seeds, but not before annoying them with one of her classic remarks. Then, shifting back to a serious tone, she mentions the question that they've been searching for someone for a long time. Just as they continue talking, the warrior leader slams Azura's head down onto the table with full force. Samyang, ready to retaliate, instantly gets his sword pressed to her neck by one of the warriors. As for the old-timer, they just politely warn him not to move an inch. And well, with his crackly bones and low HP bar, he's more than happy to comply. The warrior leader, wasting no time, goes straight to the point and demands the ghost-faced sword from her. Samyang, completely shocked, stays silent. But her lack of response only makes the warrior group way more impatient. As they're chattering away, Azura, having absolutely enough of this nonsense, turns to the old man and asks for permission to whoop these guys. The old man gives a casual nod. The second he gets the go-ahead, Azura rockets up from the table, and with one swing sends an entire line of warriors flying like bowling pins. Samyang, hyped up, is about to jump in too, but the old-timer calmly holds her back, explaining that Azura hates it when people spoil his fights. The remaining warriors, now seeing their boss get smacked like a fly, charge at Azura, who's just standing there grinning. Meanwhile, outside, the freaky duo tracking the cart finally arrives. As they discuss the possibility that their targets might be inside the hotel, a massive explosion shakes the entire building. A bit nervous, they step inside, only to be greeted by the sight of Azura standing tall, while every single warrior lies knocked out on the floor. Samyang immediately recognizes these newcomers as curses. One of them, confirming that Azura was the one who broke the sword, lunges at him. Samyang, concerned, yells for Azura to be careful. But before she can even finish her sentence, Azura smacks the absolute soul out of the curse, sending him crashing straight into the wall. Azura, the literal Chad, casually wipes his face, complaining that the guy's hand felt nasty. Meanwhile, the poor curse is sitting there with his arm bent like a zigzag ruler. But then, Azura notices something weird. The other curse, who was here just a second ago, is gone. Suddenly, the fallen warriors on the ground start screaming in agony. Right before Azura's eyes, their bodies dissolve as their life force gets sucked away by the curse. In mere moments, the curse mutates into a full-fledged monster. Azura, now visibly confused, turns to the old man and asks if this is something he's familiar with. The old man confirms, but Samyang quickly corrects him, stating that this technique is called martial arts vampiric osmosis style. Sounds like some expensive $9 water bottle they'd sell at Whole Foods. According to her, the curse's name is the Bloodsucker, an assassin working for Fort Sovereign. He can absorb living bodies to gain ki and their powers, and the more he absorbs, the more unkillable he becomes. Grandpa finds this pretty strange, while Azura, upon hearing that the monster is immortal, grows even more interested. As the monster strides toward Azura, loading up a devastating punch, Azura eagerly prepares to counter, but at the last second, the old-timer shoves him aside. He wants to demonstrate the power of his seeds to Samyang. Just as the monster's punch is about to strike, the old man flicks one of his seeds at the incoming attack. The impact is so strong that the seed sinks into the monster's body, crunching him from the inside out. For a brief moment, everything pauses. Then, suddenly, the monster starts transforming. His entire body warps and stretches, twisting into a colossal tree that shoots up so high it nearly touches the sky. The old man, admiring his handiwork, casually claims that he originally created these seeds just to grow his own immortality herbs. However, as he turns to call Samyang, he notices she's nowhere to be seen. Suddenly, they hear the voice of the cursed leader from high up in the massive tree. He's holding Samyang hostage, warning them to never forget his face. But before he can say another word, Azura hurls his sword straight at the guy's head. The blade pierces through, but to their shock, the curse becomes transparent just in time and vanishes, leaving no trace behind. Despite searching, they find nothing. Frustrated, Azura suggests they ask their steed instead. The old-timer thinks for a moment, then, without hesitation, they start riding. In an empire, Samyang is yeeted into a prison cell while the curse, having dropped her off, heads toward the central building. Meanwhile, back in the forest, the old-timer pulls out a bag of seeds, letting the steed take a good whiff. The moment it catches the scent, the horse loses its mind and takes off like a rocket. The duo barely manages to hop on before they're sent hurtling forward at a speed so ridiculous that Einstein himself will be rolling in his grave. Meanwhile, in the central building, the curse presents himself before Juhong, the commander of the assassin company. He reports what happened, which immediately sends Juhong into a rage. As the captain of the intelligence squad, the curse was expected to handle things properly, yet despite his position, he failed miserably. Trying to clear himself, the curse explains that the situation turned far worse than expected. Instead of forcing a fight, he chose to extract information, which he believes was the best possible outcome. Juhong, though disappointed, ultimately decides to give him the benefit of the doubt. Shifting focus, he inquires about Samyang, who he recalls belongs to the remnants of the Grand Martial Union. The curse confirms this and requests permission to interrogate her, hoping to extract intel about her companion's identities and Skymist Valley's involvement in the matter. However, Juhong denies his request outright, ordering her immediate execution. She has already done irreversible damage by destroying the sword. He adds that once she is dealt with, they will march against Skymist Valley to avenge their fallen men. If those two who interfered are connected, they will likely show up themselves. This declaration unnerves the curse. A direct decree from Fort Sovereign forbids them from going to war against the Martial Arts Union, yet Juhong is fully intent on disregarding it. However, Juhong sees Skymist Valley as nothing more than a gang of clout-chasing criminals who swipe powerful artifacts. To him, they deserve everything coming their way. So without a second thought, he orders the summoning of Red Moon and Blue Demon to take care of business. Despite his hesitation, the curse ultimately agrees. Meanwhile, the steed is flashing toward its target with lightning speed. On the other side, Samyang is fuming. She's still mad at herself for letting her guard down, and in her frustration, she accidentally snaps the rope she was tied to. Just as she's standing there, processing the fact that she's somehow free, the entire carriage comes crashing through the prison wall, landing right in front of her. As she struggles to believe her eyes, they urgently press her to hurry before the guards arrive. Outside, the guards hear the disruption and rush to open the door, only for the entire building to explode. On the other side of the blast stands Azura, gripping his sword. The explosion creates the perfect opening for the steed to get its run-up, but the loud bang has now alerted every single guard in the area. Meanwhile, in the central building, the commander sits with Red Moon and Blue Demon, entrusting them with the complete eradication of Skymist Valley. Blue Demon Jang, leader of the pursuit squad, confidently offers to take on the job, claiming it's a 10-day task for his group. However, Red Moon Joe, captain of the Sarong squad, argues that his squad is better suited for the uneven terrain of Sky Mist Valley and boasts that they'll finish it in just 3 days. As they debate, they're suddenly startled by a loud bang from outside. Rushing out, they are shocked to see it's Azura standing in a massive crater formed by his own power, fighting off guards like it's just another day. The curse, terrified, frantically points at Azura, stammering that this is the guy he was talking about. The commander, stunned beyond words, can only stare in disbelief. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Azura is sprinting toward the carriage, trying to make his escape, when suddenly, an arrow from the archers lodges itself right into his butt. Enraged, Azura slams his staff into the ground with full force, obliterating the entire area into nothing but rubble. The commander, witnessing this insanity, can barely process what just happened. In a panic, he screams for his captains, declaring that whoever takes down Azura will lead the assault on Sky Mist Valley and will be promoted to vice captain. Hearing that, they all charge toward Azura. Meanwhile, Grandpa, with his usual crackhead energy, starts stomping the crap out of Azura for almost getting him killed by pulling that stunt. As things finally calm down and they prepare to leave, they suddenly notice something. Azura's pet, Sally the Salamander, is missing from one of their chests. Spotting Sally on their carriage, Azura instantly chases after it. But just as Azura, while pet calling it, is about to catch it, an axe comes flying down, slicing off its tail. Everyone's expressions turn dark at the sight, while Azura, now seething with rage, notices the culprit, who is none other than the Blue Demon. Without hesitation, both the Blue Demon and Red Moon charge at Azura, ready to throw hands. Azura stands his ground, prepared to unleash havoc, but suddenly, out of nowhere, the old-timer's steed swoops in, snatching Azura up in its mouth. Meanwhile, Sally the Salamander, channeling an immense amount of power, explodes, wiping out the charging enemies and engulfing the entire area in a massive eruption, leaving nothing behind but a giant atomic bomb-sized crater and raging fire. In that nick of time, however, Azura's group manages to reach a nearby cliff, all thanks to the steed's insane speed. Meanwhile, the old-timer, clearly disappointed with their reckless approach, shakes his head. And to rub it in even more, Azura, still sore, asks him to take the arrow out of his butt. Instead of the arrow, the old man gives him his fist instead. After that, their journey to Schemis continues, leading them to a mountain pass where suddenly a spear strikes the ground in front of them, followed by voices warning them to stop. As Azura starts to lose his thing, Selmion quickly calms him down. She then whistles and runs into the fog while the duo waits, expecting a grand welcome with a veritable feast and a spread of delicious dishes. As Oldie starts rambling more about food, both of them begin drooling, already imagining the flavors. After a while, Selmion returns, apologizing for making them wait, but instead of inviting them to a glorious banquet, she's actually parting ways with them. She assures them that if fate allows, she'll repay them one day, then says a heartfelt goodbye to the steed before vanishing into the mist. And just like that, my boys are left hanging. No feast, no warm send-off, just cold, hard rejection. With nothing else to do, they decide to move on. Eventually, they reach a quiet resting spot where Ashura decides to eat away his sorrow while the old man busies himself with his old-school tracking rods to find their way. But no amount of food can fill the void Ashura feels after his beloved pet Sally is gone. And let's be real, losing a pet salamander that can nuke things? Yeah, that one stings. Hearing that, the old man loses it and throws the rods at Ashura, yelling that he already told him to get rid of that damn salamander, but he kept it anyway. As they keep yapping at each other, another warrior, along with his companions, is observing them from a distance. One of them, the sect leader, turns to a guardsman named Jang and asks what he spotted. Jang, carefully observing the duo below, notes that they're dressed pretty weirdly. The sect leader brushes it off and pushes forward, reminding them that they need to reach Spirit Roan Forest before sunset. With that, they move on and reach the forest just as night falls. Now, Spirit Roan Forest is said to be home to a great giant sage, a sorcerer of immense size and power who supposedly resides deep within the woods. However, Jang has never seen anything like that in the forest before. He figures it's probably just a rumor and suggests they turn back. The sect leader bluntly rejects the idea, refusing to leave until they meet the giant sage themselves. Jang, a bit scared, tries to press the issue again, but as they argue, he suddenly notices something. The terrifying mountainous sage in front of them just moved. Seeing that, the sect leader instantly charges straight at it. Meanwhile, someone else is already busy fighting the giant, literally beating it down. The guy is putting holes in that literal behemoth and taking it straight to the ground. And of course, it's none other than Azura. As the giant falls, the old man calls out to the giant Folos, asking if he really thought he would be safe hiding in there. The The giant, however, looked surprised. He was told that the emissaries of yore had all disappeared, yet here it is, that old man standing right in front of him. The old man questions where he heard that, to which Fallas casually replies that he just heard it from the birds, and with that he dies. Just as the old man asks if the giant has any final words, the sect leader and Jang arrive, completely losing it over the fact that the giant is dead, and that the duo in front of them killed it. In a blind rage, the sect leader orders Jang to attack. With a swift movement, he slashes them both to death, however, only in her dreams. In reality, as soon as they appeared, Azura knocked the crap out of them, leaving them completely cold. Azura, annoyed, considers finishing them off, but the old-timer just sighs and suggests leaving them behind and continuing their venture. As they leave, Jang, already regaining consciousness, wakes up his sect leader, reminding her that they need to leave now if they want to get out of the forest before sunset. Both of them, a bit panicked, quickly start making their way out, while Azura, watching them from a cliff, casually asks if the old man used his memory-frying spell properly. The old man confirms, and with that, they get back on their journey. The scene shifts to a few years ago in a nearby town. A father hands his son a neckband of the Guardian, revealing that it was bestowed upon their clan by the so-called Blue-Eyed Sage. The wearer of this band will gain tremendous power, but at the cost of catastrophic ruin. As the father gives it to his son, he warns him to only use it in the most impossible situation. Years later, the boy has grown up to become a sage. While venturing outside his town, he comes across a badly beaten warrior, buried under the landslide of a mountain. Feeling pity, he takes the injured warrior back to his household, where he bandages him up and provides him with food and shelter. As the warrior slowly recovers, the two develop a strong bond, spending time laughing and eating together. After a few days, the warrior is fully healed, and that's when his men finally arrive, looking for him. The moment they see him, they bow deeply, showing respect. The warrior then bids farewell to the sage, expressing his gratitude before leaving with his group. As they head back, the warrior suddenly spots the sage's messenger sprinting toward them with his pale face and fear in his eyes. Without saying a single word, the messenger rushes past them and heads straight for the sage's house. The warrior watches him go, feeling a sense of suspicion creeping in. Back at the house, the messenger hands a letter to the sage, and as he reads it, terror washes over him. The letter reveals a 300 gold coin bounty placed on the warrior he had helped earlier. Shaken, he quickly puts the letter away and sends the messenger off, only to freeze in horror as he sees the same warriors group returning. They know that the sage's household is now aware of their criminal status, and with that, they massacre everyone in sight, leaving behind a bloody mess of bodies scattered everywhere. Among the fallen, the sage, barely clinging to life, manages to drag himself into a safe room. With his last few breaths, he thinks of his slaughtered household, and in his grief, he blames himself for everything that has happened. His eyes then fall upon a small box, the same box that holds the neckband his father had given him when he was a child. He remembers his father's words about using it only when the other side looks impossible. Without a second thought, the sage places the neckband around his neck. The moment it touches his skin, his bones begin cracking and snapping, twisting in unnatural ways. As he trembles in agony inside the room, the warriors group follows his blood trail to the door. They call out to the sage, but when he doesn't respond, the warrior signals one of his men to take down the door. However, as the man walks up to the door, it swings open by itself, but before he can react, something slashes his head into pieces in an instant. Everyone stands in shocked silence, until two glowing eyes emerge from the darkness, followed by a massive werewolf-like monster stepping out. It's the sage, now fully transformed into an enraged beast. Meanwhile, outside, the other men are busy gathering loot when a sudden blast rips through a building, sending debris flying. Their warrior comes crashing out of the wreckage, only to be followed by the werewolf monster itself, casually walking out with the warrior's remains dangling from its jaws. Terrified, the remaining men drop everything and run for their lives, but the werewolf hunts them down, brutally tearing apart anyone in its path. As this is happening, Azura and the old man sit comfortably on a nearby rooftop, grinning in excitement as they finally find the Hellhound collar they were looking for. As the monster is about to devour the warrior leader and everyone around him, Azura suddenly appears out of nowhere and smashes its head into the ground. The impact is so powerful that the monster's head gets stuck for a moment before it forcefully pushes itself free. Azura starts arguing with the monster, telling it to calm down if it wants to transform back into its human form. However, the wolf completely ignores him and lunges straight at the warrior leader. Just in time, Azura stops him by slamming a punch into his gut, sending him crashing through multiple walls. Seeing the destruction, Azura wonders for a second if he should have nerfed his punch, but his attention quickly shifts to the warrior and his men standing behind him. With an intimidating glare, he coldly tells them to get out of his way. Azura then refocuses on the wolf now buried under the rubble of a collapsed house. Just as he's about to convince the beast to calm down, his eyes widen as he notices the lifeless bodies of the sage's entire family scattered around. Azura stares at the devastating sight, but before he can react, the sage's neckband glows once more and he starts transforming again. With a monstrous roar, the sage fully evolves into a four-legged, jet-black beast, far more powerful and terrifying than before. Meanwhile, the warrior group is fleeing for their lives, heading toward the exit. But just as they are about to reach it, the wolf jumps in front of them, tearing down the exit. The warriors are left in utter disbelief and terror as the wolf starts smashing them one by one, killing them left and right in front of their leader. Now at last, only the leader remains, apologizing in fear, but it's already too late, and the wolf tears him apart. Azura arrives just then, asking for the neckband, having allowed the sage to get his revenge. However, the wolf turns toward Azura with full ferocity and blood in his eyes. As he charges Azura despite not wanting to, readies himself to fight back. Azura, gripping his staff, swings it at the incoming wolf before following up with a series of whacks to its front legs. The beast crashes down, and Azura doesn't waste a second. He delivers a mighty swing straight into its body. The impact is so intense that it creates a massive crater, leveling everything in a large area. Even Oldie is caught in a shockwave, tumbling through the air only to be saved at the last moment by his trusty steed. As the dust settles, Azura finds himself standing before the sage, who begins to dissipate into the air, leaving behind the neckband. Azura picks it up and hands it to the old-timer, who examines it with a knowing look before transforming it into a talisman for storage. With this, they secured one of the 3 Hellhound collars, 2 more to go. With everything settled, they burn all the bodies and leave the area. On their way, Azura recalls that the sage had thanked him before fading away. That little detail sticks with him. Meanwhile, back at the site where Sejun and his serpent met their end, someone else is rummaging through the remains. This mysterious individual follows the cart tracks, which lead him straight to the gigantic tree, the very same one the old-timer had transformed the bloodsucker into. He continues his search and heads toward assassin territory, only to be shocked seeing that it has somehow transformed into a damn, all thanks to our Sally, comment S for respect in chat. As night falls somewhere else in the forest, the duo is peacefully sleeping, including their trusty steed. Suddenly, something in the campfire stirs, snapping the steed awake. In it, he notices Sally rebirthing from the flames, casually walking up to Ashura, like it's never left. Meanwhile, in a distant snowy terrain, a girlish-looking warrior stands over a pile of bodies with his knife drenched in blood. This warrior has a spider tattoo on his back, and there is a ferocity in his eyes. Meanwhile, in another place, a curses captain sits atop a house, looking at a map drawn by other curses to track someone, but they all fail to get close to him. Frustrated, the captain crumples the map, and just then, his men call them down. They are at the sage's household, where bodies of men lay brutally killed on the ground. As the captain descends, he praises his men for searching well. However, they reveal that they haven't heard back from the message they sent via pigeon, and it's been 10 days. This makes them wonder if something happened back at headquarters. However, the captain remains confident, as according to him, the assassin company is protected by captains like Blue and Red, along with the leader himself, so it's unlikely they couldn't handle the situation. Still, just to be sure, he decides they'll return to headquarters to check things out for themselves. But before that, he has one more stop in mind. He wants a second encounter with someone special. As they scout a village, one of the captain's men tells him the story of the Divine Moon Maiden. She is a mysterious woman who once saved Grain Drop Village when its people were starving and hopeless. She brought food, aided the weak, and helped in every possible way. As the villagers recovered, they built a shrine in her honor to worship her. Thanks to her efforts, Grain Drop Village continues to thrive to this day. Hearing the story while gazing at the shrine below, the captain grows excited. Despite the peaceful atmosphere, he and his sidekick break down the door, demanding to see the Divine Moon Maiden. Suddenly, an old woman emerges, scolding them for their rudeness. She insists they leave, revealing that the Divine Moon Maiden cannot see them at the moment. The captain, letting out a maniacal chuckle, forces his way inside. As he steps in, he spots a group of maidens shielding a woman who he assumes to be the Divine Moon Maiden. When they refuse to move, the lady herself gently asks them to step aside, stating that resistance is useless. As she attempts to speak, the captain strikes her across the room, sending her flying. The maidens rush to her in concern, but the captain warns them to stand down or face his wrath. Rising to her feet, the Divine Moon Maiden calls off her maidens. The captain, questioning her as she remembers him, rips off her clothes, revealing that she is actually a boy underneath. All the maidens, seeing this, are shocked, while the captain claims that they should have known that before. As Divine Moon tries to get back up, the captain notices the spider tattoo on his back. This makes the captain even angrier, and he grabs Divine Moon by the hair, threatening to torment him with a slow and agonizing death. With that, he slams his head into a nearby table and leaves, while all the maidens rush to help Divine Moon and treat his injuries. While walking out, the captain is shocked that the tattoo he just saw is not at all what he remembers. He wonders if he is mistaken, however, he is confident that he could never forget the face of the one who did that to them. Back inside the building, as the maidens aid Divine Moon with just a quick shift of his body, he changes his tattoo back to its original form. Trickery level, Masterclass. In the nearby forest, some Divine Moon's kin hunters are out searching for deer. Two of them, however, look absolutely terrified and just want to go home. One of the other hunters, clearly annoyed, scolds them for being scared. But before their argument escalates, they spot a rabbit in the distance. However, before they can finalize their imaginary feast, the rabbit suddenly bolts. In a panic, the archer fumbles and fires an arrow, but completely misses. Frustrated, he spins back to the others, ready to blame literally anyone but himself for ruining the shot. But that's when he notices their expressions. They're not even looking at him anymore. As he turns, there stands a monstrous bear with the arrow he shot lodged in its ear. The bear roars at them with full ferocity, but then suddenly drops down. It's Azura who took down the beast. However, since the hunter's arrow also hit it, he decides to share the meat with them and even offers them a ride home. As the kids reach home, they immediately start calling for their parents, eager to show them what they've just caught. But to their shock, no one is there. Just as confusion sets in, they notice massive flames erupting from the village center. Without hesitation, they rush toward the fire, knowing their parents will be there to help, leaving Azura and the old man behind. At the village center, the townspeople are doing everything they can to fight the raging flames. Bucket after bucket of water is thrown in a desperate attempt to contain the fire, while the village elders stand anxiously, hoping for some miracle. Suddenly, someone spots the arrival of the Divine Moon Lady. Immediately, the villagers rush toward her, their faces filled with hope, while she gazes at the fire with a curious expression, as if lost in thought. Meanwhile, on a nearby cliff, the captain and his warrior watch the scene unfold. The warrior realizes that the villagers' coordinated effort might actually be enough to put out the blaze soon. However, the captain remains unfazed, as after all, this fire was merely a warning. According to him, the boy dressed as the Divine Moon Lady single-handedly wiped out the most powerful sect in the northern martial arts realm and even killed his father, who was once a renowned sword master. The revelation sends a chill through his men, but the captain reassures them. He doesn't blame anyone for being fooled. After all, the Divine Moon's elegant appearance hides a beast within. As he speaks, the captain reveals a bit of backstory. A ruthless band of mercenary assassins known as the Black Pearl once terrorized the northern regions, leaving a trail of blood wherever they went. At one point, they even killed the captain's uncle, igniting a brutal war between his family's sword sect and the Black Pearl. The war was brutal, but in the end, the kinsmen emerged victorious. As if that wasn't enough, they turned their attention to the Dogo clan, the ones who had hired those merciless killers, and reduced them to ashes. Literally. With that victory, the captain's father, who had led the charge, earned the title of powerful swordmaster. However, he decided to retire and start his own life like an anime protagonist after an epic arc. The captain believes that his father took in a child from the Black Pearl, one who would have likely been sold into slavery if they hadn't claimed him. That boy, Wari, ends up working in their household, helping with various tasks, including assisting the captain himself. Honestly, the kid was basically an unpaid CS intern at that point. One day, as the captain was heading out, he stopped Wari and asked if he had ever dreamed. Actually had a vision for his own future. The captain tried to explain what a dream was, but Wari, having never thought about it before, just blinked in confusion. The captain then suggested he should find a purpose in life. My third grade teacher told me the same exact thing. Yet here I am recapping comics on YouTube. Needless to say, you don't always find your purpose. Anyway, it wasn't until much later that the captain uncovered a disturbing truth that his father had planted an insect inside Wari's body when he was first brought in. This insect was no ordinary bug. It responded to the father's command and could literally devour Wari from the inside out whenever he wanted. Time passes swiftly and a decade goes by. One day, a member of the kinsmen approaches the captain's father, advising him to replace the insect as its lifespan only lasts 10 years. However, the captain's father refuses. He has developed a strong trust in Wari, believing that after 10 years of loyalty, there is no chance of betrayal. The kinsman warrior, however, couldn't shake off his concerns. Wari was from the Calamity Demon tribe, an infamous group known for their savage nature. To him, it felt like they were raising a wolf among sheep, and he wasn't about to ignore that possibility. The captain's father, however, reassured him that thanks to the parasite, he had been monitoring even the slightest changes in Worry's temperament. So far, everything seemed in place. In fact, the boy wasn't even aware that the parasite existed inside him. Though still concerned, the warrior reluctantly agrees but suggests keeping the captain away from Worry. The captain's father, however, dismisses the idea, believing his son is more than capable of handling himself. As they argue, the captain stands outside, waiting for the conversation to end so he can seek guidance on something. Realizing his father is busy, he eventually walks away. Sometime later, while out hunting birds, the captain, perhaps a little too relaxed, ended up casually revealing the truth about the parasite to Worry. He knew he was making a mistake even as he said it, but once the words left his mouth, there was no taking them back. He even brushed it off afterward, joking that he had overheard plenty of things that didn't make sense anyway. However, Worry wasn't laughing. His mind fixated on one detail. The parasite had a lifespan of 10 years. And wouldn't you know it, that exact day marked the 10th anniversary of its implantation. Unintentionally, the captain had just broken Worry's shackles, and that was very bad news. With a maniacal smile, Worry reminds the captain of the time he was asked about his dream. He claims that his dream has finally come true. Sensing danger, the captain instinctively reaches for his sword, but before he can unsheath it, Worry lunges at him, stopping him in his tracks. Overpowering the captain, Worry then storms toward the kinsman's house, where he unleashes pure carnage, cutting down warriors left and right. The spider tattoo on his back pulses with energy, seemingly fueling his killing intent and ferocity. In no time, he slaughters everyone in his path, brutally tearing through the once proud warriors of the kinsman. Eventually, he notices the captain nearby, barely alive, his body battered and his breath heavy. Despite having every joint in his body dislocated, the captain has somehow managed to crawl back. Walking past him, Worry pauses for a moment before speaking. At first, he had considered letting the captain live. But now, since the captain was the one who helped make his dream a reality, Worry decides it's only fair to return the favor, out of mercy. Hearing this grim story, the warrior asks if killing Worry on sight would be the best option. But the captain has other plans. He believes Worry deserves something far worse than a quick death. No, he wants to break him first, to push him to the very brink before finally taking him out. Determined, the captain orders his warrior to brief each team on their mission. At midnight, they will unleash a massacre. He is set on making Worry suffer by killing everyone in front of him, an eye for an eye, but with extra brutality. As they discuss their plan, a scout arrives in a hurry, informing the captain that he has seen something suspicious. As night falls, the fires in the village dim, and the families affected by the recent violence gather in a large hall for shelter. Worry is among them, tending to the wounded and offering help. Meanwhile, between the paths of a mountain pass, the scout leads the captain and his warrior to whatever strange sight he has discovered. As they walk, they discuss an odd mystery that the bandits never seem to attack the Divine Moon village. And it is all because of Worry's presence. The warrior speculates that the bandits might see Worry as some kind of divine protector, a higher being they dare not challenge. Either that, or they are just really superstitious. Whatever the reason, the village remains untouched. Just as the conversation starts to get interesting, the scout suddenly stops and points ahead. What they see leaves the captain momentarily speechless. Back at the village, as the families rest inside the hall, Worry stands on the roof, guarding them against unseen threats. Meanwhile, in the mountains, the scout reveals what he has found is a rotting corpse. At first, the captain is confused as to the reason the scout brought him there. But then the scout gestures further down the mountain. The captain follows his gaze, and what he sees sends a chill down his spine. Hundreds of similar corpses are scattered across the landscape. The captain's excitement grows as he finally understands why the bandits never dared to attack the village. Before he can fully process the revelation, a sharp whistle cuts through the air. A distress signal from one of their men back in the forest indicating an enemy attack. Panic spreads among them as they struggle to comprehend why anyone would ambush them in the middle of nowhere. Meanwhile, back at the source of the chaos, Worry is in full predator mode, cutting down soldiers with ruthless efficiency. One by one, they fall until he notices reinforcements charging toward him. But instead of fear, a grin stretches across her face. From a distance, the old-timer observes the scene, puzzled as to why someone like Worry would expose himself in such a vulnerable situation. Beside him, Azura sleeps soundly, undisturbed by the chaos, until the old man abruptly kicks him in the face. Talk about an aggressive alarm clock. With a smirk, the veteran remarks that as a spider, Worry has been lured out of his nest just as intended. According to him, the villagers Worry used were mere bait, drawing in more predators like the captain, just as a spider ensnares its prey in the wild. However, their true target remains Worry, making this an ideal opportunity. Back in the forest, Wari continues her ruthless assault, weaving effortlessly between attacks. Each attempted strike is met with a swift counter, leaving no time for her enemies to react. Fear begins to take hold of the warriors as they witness her relentless brutality. As the captain and his group arrive, they are met with a chilling sight of Wari standing among a battlefield of corpses, effortlessly eliminating any who dare approach. This, the old-timer decides, is the perfect moment to flip the script. If the hunters wanted to fight, well, it's time to introduce them to the joys of being hunted. As the captain's group lands, they're stunned to see their entire crew dead right before their eyes. Out of nowhere, a raspy voice of Wari calls out from behind. They spin around only to catch her in the act of gruesomely finishing off the last surviving man. Two of the captain's men, fueled by rage, charge at him like they've just seen him post a TikTok dissing their squad. Meanwhile, his loyal sidekick vows to hold Wari down even if it costs him his life. But as soon as the warriors reach her, she tears through them effortlessly, as if they were nothing more than paper. Undeterred, the sidekick launches his signature 7-strike lightning attack. Wari, however, dodges each blow with ease before swiftly snapping his neck. Yet to his surprise, despite his broken neck, the sidekick still manages to grab Wari's wrist, holding him in place just as the captain prepares his most powerful move, the Sword of Heavenly Tumult. With immense force, he unleashes a barrage of slashes, cutting down everything in their path, the ground, the trees, and even his own fallen comrade. But before he can feel triumphant, a mocking laugh echoes from a nearby tree. Wari, completely unharmed, watches him with amusement, calling him cold-hearted for cutting down his own men. He strikes a nerve, taunting him for being just as ruthless as his father. Enraged, the captain unleashes another powerful slash, but he dodges with ease. He follows up with a flurry of attacks, yet not a single one lands. Before he can react, Wari slips beneath him and counters with a brutal kick, sending him crashing to the ground. As he scrambles to recover, Wari delivers another blow, launching him straight into a tree. Now visibly injured, the captain struggles to get back on his feet. But before he can fully rise, Wari steps onto his sword, pinning him down. With a smirk, he presses his foot into his chest, forcing him to spit out blood. Then, as if to make a point, he picks up a rock, crushing it effortlessly in his palm, showing a clear demonstration of just how easily she could do the same to his skull. Wari, puffed up with pride, brags that he's been more powerful than the captain since birth. No amount of training could close that gap. Meanwhile, the captain, sprawled on the ground, looks like he's just over it, silently begging Wari to stop flexing and get on with the killing already. Sensing his silence, Wari presses down harder, revealing the cruel truth that it was the captain's own father who hired them to eliminate his own brother, implanting control parasites in all of the villagers. The revelation leaves the captain in stunned disbelief. Seeing the doubt flicker in his eyes, Wari pushes further, determined to shatter whatever image the captain still holds of his father. With a chilling smirk, Wari recounts his own torment at the hands of the man, forced to endure nightly horrors under the reason of testing the truth of his emotions. Tears begin to spill down the captain's face, but instead of despair, he laughs bitterly. He claims that his father must have understood the reality of handling a beast like Wari. Perhaps that's why he did what he did. Wari, not vibing with that comeback, swings once and lops off the captain's head in a flash. Still caught up in his own thoughts, Wari suddenly senses someone behind him. Turning, he finds Azura staring at him in confusion that he hadn't expected Wari to still be so composed after everything. Acting fast, he attempts to knock Wari unconscious, but to his shock, Wari effortlessly dodges the attack. In an instant, Wari leaps onto Azura's head, attempting to twist it down, assuming he's just another one of the captain's underlings. Wari twists Azura's head a full 180 degrees. Well, at least now he won't have to turn around when people talk behind his back. However, just as he is about to land back on his feet, Azura suddenly swings his staff, striking Wari in the gut with enough force to send him crashing into a massive rock. The impact is so immense that Wari smashes straight through it, reducing it to rubble. Meanwhile, Azura casually rotates his head back to its original position, as if giving himself a quick chiropractic adjustment. Azura is impressed by Wari's resilience, but as he notices this shattered rock, wondering did he overdo it again and accidentally kill him. However, before he can think on it, a sudden explosion of debris sends rubble flying as Wari bursts out of the wreckage, charging at him with terrifying speed. Azura barely has time to react, but as Wari swings, he flips upside down in midair, effortlessly dodging the attack. Amused, he acknowledges his power and speed. Curious to test him further, Azura decides to engage in a bare-handed battle. The two exchange blows, dodging and countering each other with incredible precision. But eventually, Wari manages to land a solid hit to Azura's gut. The moment the impact registers, Azura smirks and declares that the warm-up is over. Without hesitation, he retaliates with full force by striking Wari, sending him crashing to the ground, clutching his stomach in pain. Worry struggles to comprehend how someone could possess such overwhelming strength, with his power far surpassing anything he's ever encountered. Before he can recover, Azura follows up with another devastating punch, launching Worry across the forest. Lying on the ground, battered and barely breathing, Worry seems utterly defeated. But just as it appears to be over, he suddenly starts chanting strange words. Azura approaches, but rather than being shocked, his eyes light up with excitement. A monstrous black spider erupts from Worry's body, tearing him apart in the process. This was the true target old-timer and Azura had been hunting. Now seeing it emerge at last, Azura grips his staff, preparing for the real battle to begin. However, to his surprise, the spider doesn't attack or seek revenge. Instead, it leaps away and flees, hopping from tree to tree in desperation. As Worry, now fully transformed into the spider, dashes through the forest, regret creeps in. He had underestimated someone as strong as Azura, and now he has no choice but to escape as far as possible. Just as he thinks he has made it to safety, his heart sinks as he notices the old-timer is standing directly in his path with his glowing eyes piercing through the darkness. Worry freezes in shock, unable to comprehend how the elder materialized in front of him so suddenly. The old man, trying to sound mysterious, speaks in a deep, measured tone, asking how many souls Worry has taken. Before Worry can react, Azura's spear comes hurtling toward him, piercing straight through Spider's body and ripping apart his insides. The mangled spider crashes to the ground, twitching as its strength fades. By the time Ashura arrives, the old-timer has already sealed the spider's essence into one of his talismans. Azura, grateful for the help, informs him that Worry's body had been harboring the giant spider all along. Unlike the previous hosts they had encountered who lost all control, this one had managed to maintain some level of awareness. This revelation surprises the old man. Curious, they turn their attention to Worry's fallen body. Examining him closely, the elder notes that his physique is unnaturally tough, more like that of a powerful wild beast than a human. He recalls a tribe called Yor, known for having similar physical traits, but something tells him Worry doesn't belong to them. All these years, Worry had unknowingly been struggling to satisfy the black spider's hunger, caught in a relentless battle within himself. Yet from what the old man can tell, this spider wasn't responsible for raising the villagers as bait. If anything, it seems like Worry had been fighting against its influence with sheer willpower. Intrigued by this strangeness, the old-timer decides to leave Worry with a parting gift before they depart. A while later in the forest, the same group of young hunters attempts to take down a deer but misses once again. The archer, clearly frustrated, scolds the two for tagging along despite his warnings. As they argue, they suddenly notice a massive bear towering behind them, the very same one they had seen Ashura take down before. To their horror, they realize the bear has their mist arrow lodged in its ear. Panic sets in as they brace themselves, convinced they are about to become its next meal. Before they can react, a familiar voice catches their attention. To their surprise, they see the Divine Moon Lady calmly sitting atop the bear, treating it as if it were her pet. With a gentle smile, she reminds them not to wander through the woods alone and leads them back. As they continue on, the bear is eventually sent on its way, but the children can't help but ask if it truly belongs to her. Worry explains that she had cared for the bear when it was just a cub, and ever since, it has remained friendly toward her. She playfully escorts the children back home with her warm and familiar presence. It was the day after the Great Fire, and ever since then, she had changed. She had always been kind, but before there was a certain distance, an unspoken sense of intimidation that kept common folk from approaching her so freely. Now, however, she mingles with the villagers, playing with the children, and greeting everyone as if she has always been one of them. With the Divine Moon Lady's presence, the village begins to change as well. The shrine is transformed into a school open to everyone, regardless of age, where those willing to learn are welcomed. The village elder appoints teachers, while the maiden herself teaches various skills, including craftsmanship, farming, and swordsmanship. Over time, Grain Drop Village flourishes, gaining recognition for its prosperity and growth. However, one day, without any warning, the maiden suddenly disappears. The villagers, worried and confused, search for her tirelessly. In an attempt to calm them, the village chief offers an explanation. He suggests that she may have returned to the heavens, the place many believe she had come from. While most accept his reasoning, one child, gazing up at the moon, remains uncertain, troubled by the elder's words. Elsewhere in the forest, Azura finds himself growing restless from constant traveling. Just as boredom starts to set in, he notices a heavily natty warrior blocking their path. The man, accompanied by his men, demands that Asura and the old man step off the cart and come to them. Azura glances toward the old man for reassurance, and with a slight nod, he receives confirmation. Slowly stepping forward, Azura issues a warning, but the warrior, insulted by his words, flies into a rage. However, before he can act, Azura swiftly draws his staff and sends him crashing into the mountains with a single powerful strike. Seeing this, the rest of the group is shocked to their core. Without hesitation, they draw their weapons and charge at Azura. However, just as he is about to swing his staff, he freezes in surprise as it is being held firmly by their leader. Before the other members can strike, a deep voice from behind the trees commands them to stand down. A tall, imposing figure steps forward, walking toward the old man with a calm yet authoritative presence. Introducing himself as Jurim, a member of the Sovereign Black Watch unit, he states that their captain wishes to meet both of them. Unimpressed by their intimidating approach, the old man questions what would happen if they refuse. Jurim, however, assures him that they would be allowed to leave peacefully without any trouble. Appreciating his respectful tone, the old man agrees to meet their leader. At Jurim's command, his men begin preparing courses, but a moment later, the buff dude freezes in shock as Azura's staff is now resting casually on his own shoulder. Meanwhile, Azura, thrilled to have finally found someone who might be a worthy punching bag, grins with excitement. Eager for another challenge, he playfully urges Jurim to grab his staff again. Bro really had his ego checked. The buffed warrior, driven by his own ego, turns around and grips his sword, ready to act. However, his leader, referring to him as Wang, calls him to stand down, reminding him that they are guests. Reluctantly, Wang obeys the command and checks on the horses he had ordered, while the young warrior is left momentarily stunned. As the oldie calls him back, Azura snaps out of his thoughts and resumes driving the cart. Embarrassed, he listens as the old man chuckles, remarking that it seems Ashura has finally met his match. Still, Azura begins reasoning with himself, convinced that he had been holding back. Once the horses are prepared, the group sets off, escorting the cart toward their hometown. As they pass through the gates, the duo notices several guards whipping captured soldiers, escorting them through the streets. Jurim, sensing their interest, casually explains that these are rebels being brought to justice. He apologizes for the harsh sight greeting them upon arrival, but the old man remains unfazed. They eventually reach the Black Watch town center, where, seated at a tea table, Jurim poses a question about whether they are familiar with an art known as spirit glimpse. As the old man dismisses any knowledge of the technique, Jurim reveals that it allows one to read memories from non-living objects. He explains that this technique has been passed down through their clan for generations. While the old man acts as he is listening, Bro's nodding like he understands, but inside he's buffering. However, Azura finds the conversation dull, lost in his own thoughts. Noticing Azura's disinterest, Jurim decides to drop a more intriguing piece of information. Using this very technique, they had investigated the recent annihilation of one of their cursed units. He claims to have seen a faded image of Ashura battling serpents and even transforming one of their assassins, Bloodsucker, into a full-blown tree. He goes on to mention another vision, one where the salamander exploded, wiping out the entire area. With suspicion in his eyes, Jurim watches their reactions. However, to his shock, the old man outright confirms that the visions are accurate and admits that they were indeed responsible for everything that happened. Jurim is taken aback, but he maintains his composure and respectfully warns them that taking responsibility would leave them with no choice but to be taken into custody. The old man, unfazed, simply tells him to try. He has suspected all along that Jurim's true intention was to lure them into a confession. Calmly, he clarifies that they never intended for such destruction. It was simply a string of unfortunate events. Without missing a beat, he challenges Jurim, telling him to gather whatever soldiers he has and attempt an arrest. As Jurim listens, shock and disbelief settle in. Meanwhile, the old man keeps pushing with his eyes locked on Jurim, practically handing him an open invitation to make a move if he actually has the guts for it. Damn, he is him. In the town prison, the guards drag the captured rebels through the halls before tossing them into a cell. Inside, the rebels, who were already in prison, stare in shock. Seeing more of their comrades caught is the last thing they expected. One of the guards, clearly enjoying their distress, chuckles and remarks that at least they got their former sect brothers as cellmates. Inside the cell, the sect leader watches in concern, his mind racing over what this means for their sect's future. Among them, a member named Chang suddenly reveals that they had deliberately allowed themselves to be captured as part of a plan to free the others. His words leave the group in shock, as escaping from Black Watch is no easy feat. Doubt and debate quickly follow, but the sect leader, knowing Chang's level-headed nature, suspects he may have a solid plan after all. Chang then reveals that they had sought assistance from Skymist Valley for their rescue. The mere mention of Skymist Valley sends another wave of shock through the group. However, Chang clarifies that while their Skymist Valley allies refused to go against Black Watch directly, they did grant them a divine treasure, one powerful enough to tip the odds in their favor. With that, Chang rips open a hidden pocket in his clothing, revealing a small seed nestled inside. He claims it to be an otherworldly seed, said to have been gifted to Skymus Valley by an unnamed sage. As he holds it up, the other sect members gather around. Meanwhile, at the town center, the old man continues schooling Jerem, calling him out for lying about the captain wanting to see them. He reveals that he knows full well that the real plan was to have soldiers lying in wait to capture them. Hearing this, Jerem sighs and formally introduces himself as the captain of the Black Watch unit. He apologizes, explaining that he had hidden his identity to put them at ease, though it clearly didn't work as intended. The revelation catches the duo off guard, but the old man remains unfazed. In his eyes, nothing has changed as they still destroyed an entire branch of Black Watch's organization. Unbothered, he once again challenges Jerem to go ahead and attempt an arrest. However, instead of taking the bait, Jerem plays it smart. He calmly reveals that he has a different proposal to offer. Summarizing his observations, he notes that they seem to be outsiders to the Central Plains and currently have no affiliations. He proposes that they join Black Watch as operatives, assuring them that if they agree, it will have the unit's full support. He even goes so far as to dismiss the past incident as a simple misunderstanding. But the old man, maintaining a completely unfazed poker face, flat out refuses. Without hesitation, he arrogantly states that they do whatever they want, whenever they want. If Jerem truly wants to go back to his original plan and try to arrest them, then he's welcome to give it a shot. Despite seething with anger on the inside, Jerem maintains his composure and allows them to leave. This surprises the duo as they were expecting a fight. However, Jerem has no intention of making them his enemies. He plans to handle things differently. With nothing more to say, the duo stands up and prepares to leave. But just as they step forward, a massive metal cage drops from above, trapping them inside. Now brimming with confidence, Jerem smirks and declares that once someone enters Black Watch, they never leave. Unless in death. Damn, the way he said that has me feeling shook, and I'm just reading it. Azura immediately attempts to bend the steel bars, but quickly realizes they are far stronger than expected. Jerem smugly reveals that the cage is made of Millennium Frost steel, an incredibly durable material. At that moment, the buffed warrior from earlier storms into the building, accompanied by a whole squad of soldiers. They surround the cage from both sides with pure rage in their eyes. Meanwhile, in the prison cell, the captured sect members place the otherworldly seed on the ground. To their astonishment, it begins sprouting almost instantly, growing at an unnatural speed. But their relief quickly turns to horror as the plant thickens, rapidly filling the entire cell. Thorny vines burst outward, impaling everyone in their path. Back at the Black Watch stronghold, the old man remains unshaken with his cold and unreadable expression. Jerem, unbothered, remarks that had they chosen to join, they could have avoided this fate. They have only themselves to blame. Without hesitation, he orders his men to strike. Just as they extend their spears, the entire building trembles violently. The roots from the rapidly growing tree have spread beyond the prison, engulfing the entire town in a massive, entangling web of destruction. Meanwhile, inside the prison cell, the tree's roots have completely taken over, tearing through walls and floors, sending the cellmates scrambling for their lives. Over at the Black Watch stronghold, panic erupts as the roots coil and twist, demolishing buildings and impaling anyone unlucky enough to be in their path. In the central building, where Azura and the old man are moments away from being tortured, the ceiling suddenly caves in without warning. Debris crashes down, leaving the guards frozen in shock, trying to process what the hell is happening. The buff dude and his squad are swallowed by the rubble and get buried beneath layers of concrete. For a moment, everything goes eerily still. Then the debris begins to shift. A low rumble echoes through the ruins as the buffed dude rises from beneath the wreckage. He comes out lifting a massive debris off himself and tossing it aside. Surveying the destruction, he notices his guards frozen in shock and immediately barks at them to move and investigate what caused the chaos. But before they can react, one of the roots surges forward, impaling multiple of them in an instant. A sense of unease grips him, but the situation worsens when he sees Jerem engulfed entirely by the roots before his eyes. Panic sets in and he rushes forward to help. But instead of becoming plant fertilizer, Jerem casually pokes holes into the roots and phases out of them like a budget Temu version of Doctor Strange. As Jerem emerges, he suddenly remembers the prisoners, Azura and the old man. The buff leader quickly checks the cage. To his absolute horror, both of them had somehow bent the millennial steel bars and escaped. Yeah, the same bars advertised as indestructible. As he struggles to process this, his attention shifts to the duo, who are now intently observing the massive roots. A realization dawns on Oldie that this might be the very seed he once gave his Samyeon. The thought surprises him, making him wonder if she is somewhere nearby. Meanwhile, Azura is still trying to make sense of what the old man is saying when, without warning, the buff leader grabs him by the head and violently slam dunks him into the ground. POV. when you tell your gym bro that lifting is overrated. He doesn't stop there. Pressing down harder, he grinds Azura's face deeper into the dirt. Witnessing this, Jarum shouts, ordering the guards to take them down, especially Old Man. At first, the guards hesitate, but upon his command, they finally charge in, swarming toward the oldie, who remains completely unfazed. Just as the guards get close, the reason for his eerie calm becomes painfully clear. The roots explode from the ground with zero mercy, impaling every single one of them. Their screams and cries echo through the building, yet the old man simply stands there, silently listening. According to the old man, people assume plants don't have brains and can't think for themselves, but surprisingly, they're fully capable of defending their master. Saying this, he shifts his gaze toward Jarum, who immediately panics and starts channeling a spell to defend himself. But before Jarum can even finish a single incantation, roots explode toward him. Barely dodging, he leaps into the air like his life depends on it, because, well, it does. Meanwhile, the buff dude stands there absolutely flabbergasted that despite him smacking Azura into the next dimension, the kid is still standing. Azura dusts himself off, casually cracks his neck, and drops the most ominous warning of all time before turning around and uppercutting the buff dude so hard that even prime Mike Tyson would feel secondhand embarrassment. Not once, but twice. The sheer force sends the muscly dude flying straight into the wall. Jarum watches all of this unfold and starts sweating armpits. Despite being in unbelievable pain, the buffed dude still manages to grunt out some praise for Azura's hands, clearly trying to keep some of his dignity. But then his face drops as something feels off. And that's when he notices Azura is literally holding his lower half. He watches in horror as his legs fall to the ground in front of him. And it's then that he realizes he's really missing his important devices. Noticing this, he dies on the spot while Jarum, observing all of this in 4K, is visibly nervous. He overhears Oldie scolding Azura for using too much power and losing his composure. As the duo is talking, they hear a loud crash and notice Jarum fleeing the scene. However, as Jarum jumps outside, he is in disbelief as he notices the whole city engulfed by those roots, and to top it off, Azura is right behind him. With nowhere to go, Jarum starts channeling mana into his body and begins transforming into another form. Meanwhile, Azura watches in shock, expecting a powerful shift, but instead, Jarum's body ignites like burning paper, dissolving into the air. Azura stands confused, but the old man, now beside him, calmly explains that Jarum used an illusion technique to escape. When questioned, Azura reveals that Jarum vowed revenge before vanishing. Hearing this, the old man understands the gravity of the situation. They never intended to destroy the Blackwatch Stronghold to this extent, and now these newly made enemies will undoubtedly become a major problem in the future. As the destruction caused by the roots spreads, a few soldiers remain trapped beneath heavy concrete, taking their final breaths. However, Chang, the rebel prisoner responsible for the chaos, finishes them off without hesitation. Though injured, he is still standing. His comrades soon regroup with him, informing him that they cannot locate the others. The prison cell they were held in has been completely engulfed by the roots. They also assure Chang that the Blackwatch guards on the other side were likely crushed to death as well. Despite this, Chang is not satisfied. He craves revenge, and he wants it now. He orders his men to burn everything, ensuring that no trace of the stronghold remains. Just as they begin carrying out his command, a sudden rattling from the rubble behind them sends a wave of unease through the group. They had already checked the area. Nothing should be moving. From beneath the wreckage, Azura, the old man, and their steed push their way out, emerging on a cart that forces its way through the tangled roots. The rebel sect watches in shock, initially mistaking them for Blackwatch operatives. Their leader, suspicious of their intentions, immediately orders his men to eliminate them. The rebels prepare to engage with their weapons drawn. However, before they can act, Azura casually steps out of the cart. With his bare hands, he obliterates the remaining rubble with a single punch. The impact sends a devastating shockwave down the line, obliterating everything in its path. The rebels' eyes widen in disbelief. Watching the trio advance toward them, they quickly reconsider their options. Realizing that fighting would only lead to the same fate as the crushed concrete, the rebel leader nervously suggests to Chang that they invite the newcomers for a friendly chat instead. After a tense moment, Chang reluctantly agrees. And just like that, they went from fearless warriors to HR department representatives in 0.2 seconds. They choose a ruined building, clearing it out and offering Azura and the old man a proper meal. However, the old man refuses, revealing that they have pressing matters elsewhere. The sect leader and his men plead with them to stay, insisting that they at least share a meal. After some hesitation, they eventually agree. As night falls in a secluded cave far away, Jarum kneels on the ground, pleading before a hooded figure. The figure, clearly disappointed, chastises Jerem for losing all his men and still having the audacity to crawl back, begging for help. When Jerem tries to explain, the hooded figure silences him with a glare. Stepping closer, the figure coldly declares that he alone will decide whether Jerem is worthy of mercy. Without warning, he grabs the back of Jerem's head, his grip tightening with monstrous strength. Jerem's eyes bulge as the pressure increases, and when the grip intensifies, his very soul seems to fade into oblivion. Meanwhile, back at the sect's meeting point, Azura and the old man enjoy the group's hospitality, engaged in a discussion that leaves them stunned. The sect leader reveals that Fort Sovereign possesses the ability to enhance an individual's power. He explains that those who, by rare chance, gain an immense reserve of inner Qi can unlock extraordinary abilities. Such occurrences, he adds, happen only once or twice a century. But it is his next statement that truly shocks the old man. He claims that the Lord of Fort Sovereign has the power to resurrect the dead and make them even stronger than before. Hearing this, the old man's expression darkens. His voice rises in disbelief as he questions whether they are truly saying that someone exists with the divine power to bring the dead back to life. Meanwhile, in the secluded cave, Jerem's lifeless body lies motionless before the hooded figure, who dismissively refers to him as a cockroach. Stepping over the corpse, the figure approaches a massive doorway carved into the cave walls. However, just as he nears it, a deep, commanding voice halts him in his tracks. The figure immediately bowed in respect, revealing that he has brought critical information for the Lord. This, however, enrages the deep voice, which demands to know whether the matter is truly grave enough to justify disturbing the Lord during his meditation. Sensing the growing tension, the figure quickly offers to handle the situation himself and requests permission to act on the Lord's behalf. After a brief pause, the voice grants him the authority, and without hesitation, the figure departs. Beyond the doorway lies a vast underground lake, its still waters reflecting the glow of a magnificent, radiant tree standing at its center. It could have been the loading screen for an otherworldly RPG. There, bathed in light, the Lord stands ready to meditate. Slowly opening his eyes, he turns toward the source of the deep voice and asks if there is anything that requires his attention. The voice, after a brief hesitation, assures him that nothing of significance demands his concern. Satisfied, the Lord returns to his meditation, extending his hand over the water. With a simple motion, he conjures a whirlpool, lifting it into the air with effortless grace. Yet, as he does so, a long-anticipated presence begins to stir in the distance. From the swirling waters, the image of the old-timer takes form, whom he recognizes as the king of fallen emissaries, his old friend. 14 years ago, the martial arts realm found itself in an all-out war against the Northern Demon cult. The cult's sheer strength and numbers were so overwhelming that for the first time in history, all martial arts sects were forced to unite against a common enemy. However, just as the battle was about to commence, a hawk arrived carrying a letter that delivered shocking news that the entire demon cult had already been annihilated by an unknown faction. The revelation sent shockwaves throughout the martial arts realm. Determined to uncover the truth, the Alliance dispatched a team of spies to investigate. Upon reaching the cult's territory, the spies were met with a horrifying sight of the entire stronghold laying in ruins, engulfed in flames, completely obliterated. Naturally, they went back to report their findings, and the whole martial arts world erupted in cheers. People partied so hard you'd think they'd done the work themselves. Not a single person questioned who this unknown faction was, why they did it, or if they were now the bigger threat. Nope, that required thinking, and thinking was for later. However, sometime later, a group of mysterious, hooded messengers appeared, driving along a massive coffin. They dropped it in front of the Alliance leaders like an Amazon Prime delivery, handed over a letter, and casually informed them that their master wanted an answer in 10 days. With that, they departed, leaving behind the coffin and the sealed letter. When the coffin was finally opened, the martial arts leaders were left in utter shock, finding that it contained the lifeless body of the once feared leader of the demon cult. The letter, however, brought an even greater disturbance. It did not offer an alliance or gratitude for their shared enemy's defeat. Instead, it issued an ultimatum, demanding the martial arts realm's complete surrender and subjugation under the unknown faction. The terms were absolute and utterly unacceptable, throwing the entire alliance into chaos. Sects became divided. Some called for immediate war, refusing to bow to an unseen force, while others, shaken by the display of power, considered breaking away from the alliance and acting on their own. Uncertainty and discord spread like wildfire, and in the absence of a unified decision, the 10-day deadline passed. As promised, the messengers returned, but this time, they did not come alone. They arrived with an even greater force, their numbers swelling, making it clear that they weren't here to negotiate. They were here to make a decision for them. As the leader of all the martial arts alliance attempted to negotiate with the messengers, a sudden flash of steel cut through the air. In an instant, every leader was sliced in half by one of the messengers. The entire martial arts realm stood in stunned silence, unable to comprehend how their highest-ranking figures had been eliminated so effortlessly. What followed was pure devastation. The messengers unleashed havoc upon the city, mirroring the destruction they had wrought upon the demon cult. It became painfully clear that there would be no room for negotiation, only submission or annihilation. The scale of the destruction was so overwhelming that it sent shockwaves throughout the Central Plains, forcing even the most bitter rival sects to abandon their grudges. At the heart of this chaos was the leader of Fort Sovereign, a figure known as the Pale-Faced Divine Physician. He commanded an unparalleled force consisting of his 3 loyal guardian commanders and 8 powerful protector beasts. Together, these 12 individuals formed an unstoppable force that laid waste to the martial arts strongholds across the Central Plains. City after city fell, burned to the ground, obliterated without mercy. Yet not everything was reduced to ruin through sheer destruction alone. Many martial artists, overwhelmed by the power of the 12 guardians, chose to surrender and pledge allegiance to them. Most of these recruits hailed from lesser sects, while a handful had once been part of the demon cult's alliance. The pale-faced divine physician welcomed them into his growing army, and with each new follower, his forces swelled, pushing even deeper into the heart of the Central Plains. What remained of the once mighty Grand Martial Union stood in defiance but was ultimately crushed in brutal warfare. The Guardians and their soldiers showed no mercy, reducing the last remnants of resistance to dust. This was the history of the pale-faced divine physician. The sect leader recounts this tale to the duo, revealing the dark legacy of a man feared across the land. According to the sect leader, all of these events led to the formation of Fort Sovereign. Hearing this, the old man falls into deep thought. While he sympathizes with those who suffered, his main concern lies with the divine physician himself. The old man questions whether anyone has ever witnessed the divine physician performing an actual resurrection. The sect leader hesitates before answering and claims that the same unholy power used to create the 8 guardian beasts is responsible for these alleged resurrections. However, the old man remains skeptical. The sect leader insists that he has personally seen 3 of the guardian beasts, each of whom is infamous throughout the martial arts world. The first is Gujo, known as the Golden Beast. The second is Huang, the Crimson Beast. The third is Sanji Sa, the Blood Beast. These 3 were once known as the 3 monstrous phantoms, not particularly powerful, but feared for their brutal and merciless fighting methods. Their reputation became even more notorious when Gujo murdered the son-in-law of the Grand Martial Union's leader, triggering a massive scandal. In response, the leader of the deviant arts sect personally beheaded all 3 of them before the entire martial arts community. And yet, despite their execution, the trio returned as if nothing had happened. Given that their meridians had been destroyed, there should have been no possible way for them to recover, let alone grow stronger. Yet not only did they come back to life, they became exponentially more powerful. Among them, Gujo experienced the greatest growth, refining his martial arts beyond mere combat into something far more formidable. Meanwhile, deep within a cave, Wang is held captive by a hooded figure known as Gaiyang, one of the beasts of the divine physician. Heavy chains bind him as Gaiyang approaches. Upon seeing him, Wang asks if his sentence will last another month. Gaiyang ignores the question and instead delivers news that the Black Watch unit and the Assassin Company have been destroyed by their enemies. He then makes an offer. If Wang is willing to capture the culprits, he will be released from imprisonment. Wang scoffs at the proposition, refusing the job if he is expected to take them alive. However, Gaiyang clarifies that this is not a requirement. Hearing this, Wang effortlessly snaps his chains. With a grin, he agrees to the mission as anything is better than rotting away in captivity. Back at the sect's meeting place, the old man, having heard the entire history, rises to his feet. He has only one question. Where can he find out about the Fort Sovereign monsters? Sogel don't have a wiki, Alexa, or at least a cursed subreddit for this. The sect leader, however, explains that the monsters have no fixed location. They are not bound to any particular place. Hearing this, the old man grows frustrated about how they can fight an enemy they cannot even locate. Sensing his anger, the sect leader quickly clarifies, revealing that the monsters do not operate from a single base. According to him, Fort Sovereign is composed of the 12 dread lords and their vast horde of followers. As a result, the 12 founding members are free to move between any stronghold or fortress controlled by their followers, ensuring the pale-faced divine physician remains protected from his enemies. Hearing that, the old man wonders if all 12 travel together for safety in numbers. However, the sect leader explains that while they did initially move as a group, they have not been seen together in recent years. Among them, the divine physician and his 3 guardian commanders have been completely absent from the martial arts realm. Meanwhile, some of the 8 protector beasts have been spotted, but they travel alone, blending into society so well that few realize they belong to Fort Sovereign. There are even rumors that the Dreadlords have left the Central Plains entirely, yet their mere name still instills fear among their enemies. Hearing all of this, the old man grows intrigued. Just then, the sect leader mentions a hidden palace beneath the mountain rock, a place known as the lair of the Divine Physician and his most trusted servants. The entrance to the palace was first sighted among the Rocky Mountain peaks, but it soon vanished on its own. After that, it was reportedly seen in different locations, yet each time someone spotted it, the palace disappeared the very next moment. There seems to be a pattern to its disappearances, which is why no one knows where it will appear next. By the time the sect leader finished explaining, he realized that to an outsider, he probably sounded like a conspiracy theorist on his 10th cup of coffee. However, the old man is completely engrossed in the tale. He thanks the sect leader, and suddenly dozens of butterflies appear, fluttering around and confusing everyone. Within moments, the butterflies release a strange smoke, causing everyone to fall into a deep sleep. This is one of the old man's tricks, pulling the good old Bill Cosby, erasing their memories of the encounter before they wake up. As they were getting ready to head out, Azura, being the absolute menace he was, decided to completely butcher the name of the most feared figure in the martial arts world, Snail-Faced Divine Beautician. The old man confirms it, stating that they will know for sure once they meet him face to face. With that, they continue their journey, but Azura lingers for a moment, looking at the sleeping sect members. Grateful for the food and information they provided, he wishes to repay their kindness in some way. Seeing this, the old man agrees to let him help before they move on. The next day, at the ruined Black Watch Stronghold, Wong and his team investigate the scene. After surveying the devastation, one of his men informs him about the destruction caused by the roots and suggests recovering the bodies. However, as he speaks, Wong suddenly stands up and extends his hand, unleashing a powerful blast that tears through the entire cliffside, obliterating the roots in an instant. He has no intention of leaving behind a mess. Consumed by his fury, one of his men, hesitant in the face of Huang's overwhelming power, informs him that the tracks they were following indicate that their targets are close. Meanwhile, deeper in the jungle, the rebel sect rushes through a rough and treacherous trail, desperately trying to reach safety. Just as they attempt to press forward, a massive explosion suddenly erupts in front of them, obliterating everything in its path. The impact cracks the ground apart, and as the dust settles, Wong stands on the other side with his eyes filled with killing intent. Panic sets in among the rebels. Suddenly, Wang's men emerge from behind, completely surrounding them. Realizing they have nowhere to run, the sect members decide to surrender. Wang, hearing their plea, offers them a chance that if they reveal the whereabouts of the young lad and the old man, he will spare their lives. At this, all eyes turn to their leader. With an unwavering expression, this Chad refuses to reveal anything. This does not sit well with Wang. He glares into the sect leader's Chadness full eyes, but the man meets his gaze without a hint of regret. Knowing he will gain nothing from this defiant warrior, Wang decides to kill them all. As he begins channeling energy into his body, the ground trembles under the sheer force of his power. However, before he can strike, he notices a cart pulling up behind him. Azura steps out, and upon seeing him, Wang's men immediately recognize him along with the old man and the cart. The old man remarks that he knew returning to the forest would lead them to a clue. Azura, stepping forward, casually calls Wang to come closer. Recognizing him, Wang respectfully addresses him as Young Master and asks if he has any connection to the captured sect members. Mocking the situation, Azura coldly dismisses the idea of helping strangers who didn't even offer him food. He then challenges Huang to get it over with and shut up. This comment enrages Huang into maniac mode, and he solos the entire sect with one swing. Bro is literally fed Yasu, hitting a 5-man ult. The slash not only mangled the sect members, but also destroyed everything behind them in a wide AoE. However, Huang suddenly realizes he wiped out all his teammates too, but he just shrugs it off, calling them useless. Meanwhile, the old man turns pale, not because of Huang, but because he knows Asura is about to respond. Gramps really hit him with the stay calm, like he ain't about to drop a season finale on that fool. However, to Grandpa's shock, Azura ignores him and flashes toward Huang. Before Huang can react, Azura slams his staff onto the ground, causing a violent rupture in the earth. The impact is so intense that Huang begins sinking into the rubble, with rocks crumbling and crashing down around him. Despite the chaos, Huang manages to regain his footing. Witnessing such overwhelming power from a young boy leaves him both impressed and slightly concerned. Without hesitation, Huang retaliates. He channels a massive surge of energy into his palm, unleashing a devastating blast directly at Azura. The impact triggers an explosion, sending debris flying in all directions. As the dust settles, Huang's eyes widen in disbelief because standing among the wreckage, Azura remains completely unscathed. With nothing but his staff, Azura parried the yellow demon palm attack that was infused with 7/10 of Huang's key power. At that moment, Huang realizes why Jiang sent him on this mission. However, before he can process it, he suddenly notices Azura is gone. Soon, Huang feels a heavy pressure above him and, turning his head, sees Azura just inches away from unleashing devastation upon him. Reacting swiftly, he sidesteps and leaps behind Azura, narrowly avoiding the attack. Observing the kid's strikes, Huang realizes they are immensely powerful but lack precision. Seizing the opportunity, he launches his own attack, but Azura blocks it with ease and counters. Huang dodges again, growing increasingly frustrated. Determined to break through, he channels his blast energy and directs it toward Azura, yet the attack fails to leave even a scratch. Enraged, he unleashes a relentless barrage of palm strikes, but Azura skillfully parries them, spinning his staff and generating a massive shockwave that ripples through the battlefield. Azura then attempts a counterattack, but his strike misses. Among the flurry of exchanged blows, Huang manages to land a shallow cut on Azura's face. Acknowledging his opponent's resilience, Huang prepares to unleash his most powerful technique, the Blood-Mark Lightning Blast. Gathering his energy, he forms an immense sphere of power, resembling Goku's Spirit Bomb that expands rapidly. However, before he can fully control it, the energy detonates in a cataclysmic explosion, scattering debris across the forest. As the dust settles, a massive crater smokes in the aftermath of the blast. Huang, barely standing, coughs up blood with his body trembling from the strain of his own technique. Yet through the smoke of destruction, Azura remains unscathed and stoic. Without a word, he steps forward, claiming that it is his turn now. Huang, realizing he's about to get the ultimate GG scream, starts channeling up his palm attack again. However, Azura, in his "Not fam, not today" mode, in a flash swings his mighty sword and unleashes a powerful shockwave that deepens and expands the crater. The attack lands directly on Huang's body, sending him crashing to the ground, torn and severely wounded. The deep imprint of Azura's staff burns into his shoulder as he struggles to breathe, coughing up blood. Azura, assuming his job here is done, casually swings his staff to finish things off. But Huang, in his last moments of existence, has one wish. He wants to know Azura's name before getting yeeted out of the story. But Azura, unfazed, slams his staff down, creating another massive explosion. The crater now resembles a deep well, as Oldie observes from above. Yes, he is still there, watching like it's GTA 6 trailer or something. Within the devastation, only Huang's legs remain and his upper body is obliterated by the sheer force of the attack. Meanwhile, Azura stands over the remains, lost in thought. Watching from above, Oldie wonders whether taking Huang captive would have been a wiser decision. Elsewhere, deep within the forest, a tavern bustles with activity as customers enjoy their meals. Suddenly, they notice a figure approaching from the woods. At first, it appears to be a man riding a mount, accompanied by others carrying his belongings. But as the figures draw closer, it becomes clear that there is no mount. Instead, two men crawl on all fours, serving as the master's steed. Upon reaching the tavern, the master halts his mount and calls for the tavern head. The master is then seated at a table, where he orders the tavern head to bring whatever dish is ready, along with food for his men, whom he refers to as beasts. Nervous, the tavern head quickly serves the meal, but the master becomes enraged upon seeing that his beast's plates have been placed on the same table as his own. As the tavern head attempts to explain, the master, with a single swing of his staff, hurls the plates toward his men. His anger deepens when he hears no reaction from them. Determined to strip away any remnants of their humanity, he begins whipping both of them with his staff. The blows are so brutal that the men instinctively start barking, while the rest of the tavern's customers watch in horror, unable to bear the sight of such cruelty. Laughing at their suffering, the master continues the merciless beating before turning back to the tavern head and demanding whether animals are allowed to dine alongside humans. In response, the tavern head hurriedly retrieves old, worn-out animal bowls, which the master places before his beasts. He orders them to eat, reminding them of the hard journey ahead. Despite their hesitation and clear reluctance, the two men, broken in spirit, lower their heads and begin eating like pigs from the bowls. The tavern head, seething with rage at the inhumane treatment, remains silent out of fear. Once the master finishes his meal, he pays for it and departs. After that BS, he better have left more than a 20% tip. Riding his mounts as if they were mere horses, he vanishes into the distance, leaving the tavern in a stunned silence. Among the shaken onlookers, one recognizes the two men. They are the two tigers of the Easterly Gale, once feared warriors whom even the fort sovereign dared not challenge. Yet now they endure humiliation beyond comprehension. Among the onlookers, one man struggles to believe his eyes, unable to grasp what kind of master could break and tame two seasoned fighters like the tigers. The entire tavern remains in stunned silence, shaken by the sight. Far away in the depths of the forest, the two tigers lie on the ground, resting in exhaustion while their master sleeps peacefully on a hammock nearby. He is snoring until suddenly, hundreds of arrows rain down from above, piercing through every orifice of his body. It is an ambush, launched by the tigers' sect members, who have come to rescue their fallen captains. Realizing their master has been struck down, the ambush squad rushes to free the captains. However, upon seeing their condition, they are left speechless. The squad leader, shaken, apologizes for arriving late, explaining that he came as soon as he heard of their sect's fall. But before he can say more, confusion grips him as he hears the vice captain muttering faint words. Summoning the last of his strength, the vice captain manages to form his sentence, warning them to flee while referring to them as a fool. My man really thinks he's Gandalf. His expression is filled with dread and hopelessness, but before his warning can fully sink in, the master stirs. Despite the countless arrows still lodged in his body, he's already awake. The ambush squad, realizing the danger, immediately draws their weapons, ready to retaliate. Meanwhile, the master remains seated on his hammock, unfazed. With a calm and confident look, he admires their determination to fight. Then stepping out from the shadows, he reveals himself fully. The sight of his face leaves everyone in stunned silence. A chilling realization washes over them as the master, Sanji, is undeterred and unscathed, dares them all to come at him if they like. Hearing the challenge, the whole squad just froze like NPCs hitting a lag spike, while Sanji, the blood beast, stood there practically begging them to make a move. The vice captain, upon seeing the master's expression, is once again overcome by dread and hopelessness. The group leader, feeling a growing unease, quickly orders two of his men to escort the captains out while the rest form a defensive formation. However, before they can react, a blinding beam of energy streaks through the air, piercing several of them, including the group leader. The beam is so powerful that it completely obliterates the bodies of those it strikes, leaving nothing behind. Sanji, who unleashed the attack, grabs his spear and hurls it toward the remaining group, but to his surprise, someone stops it mid-air. It is the squad captain, rising to his feet. Yet instead of instilling hope, the captain turns to his men with a defeated expression and urges them to flee. He vows to hold Sanji back. Sanji overhears this and taunts them, suggesting they stay and fight. The captain, with his voice filled with desperation, yells at them to run for their lives. Though hesitant, they obey his command, but it does not sit well with Sanji. In an instant, another beam is unleashed, piercing the captain's body. The group watches in horror as Sanji follows up with a relentless barrage of beams, riddling the captain with holes and cutting down more of his men. The energy tears through their bodies and weapons as if they were mere paper. In the blink of an eye, the entire squad is annihilated, except for the vice captain, who remains kneeling on the ground, trembling in terror. Sanji steps toward the fallen bodies, mocking their efforts as a heroic attempt. He then turns his attention to the vice captain, surprised that he did not join his men in death. Offering false praise, Sanji suddenly presents the remains of the vice captain's grandchildren, who he had kept as hostages. With a smirk, he apologizes for killing them, explaining that he suspected the vice captain might rebel. Upon hearing this, the vice captain clutches the remains with his body trembling as he collapses to the ground in grief. Sanji merely stands there, watching like me when someone is crying in front of me, and I just slowly sip my drink and hope they stop on their own. Suddenly, Sanji's eyes gleam with excitement as the vice captain rises to his feet, preparing to retaliate. This is exactly what he had wanted. The vice captain, seething with rage and overflowing with killing intent, vows to make Sanji pay for what he has done. Sanji grows even more eager, recalling that the vice captain is in a state of ultimate corporeal rejuvenation, a form that grants him unimaginable strength. Before Sanji can focus further on the thought, the vice captain closes the distance in an instant, flashing toward him with deadly intent. Yet Sanji remains nonchalant. With a single swift motion, he slices the vice captain clean in half with his razor-sharp hand, spraying blood in every direction. He had expected better, but in the end, the outcome was the same. As silence falls over the battlefield, Sanji turns away, calling out to an unseen presence lurking nearby. He sensed their killing intent long before they made their move. A group of Fort Sovereign men emerges, informing him that they bear a message from the Abyssal Beast. However, Sanji immediately warns them to leave, making it clear that he has no intention of taking orders from the Abyssal. The group is visibly shaken but manages to deliver their message that the Crimson Beast has been slain by a pair of Outlanders. The mention of the Outlanders startles Sanji, drawing his full attention. Meanwhile, deep within the forest, Azura is busy washing the blood trickling from his nose. The old-timer nearby notices and reminds him that he had warned him before about the dangers of overusing his power. After a brief rest, they continue their journey, though Azura remains slightly dizzy from the previous battle. Sensing this, the old man advises him to rest a bit longer. He then shifts the conversation to Azura's staff, asking if he has grown accustomed to it. Azura confirms but admits that it is far trickier to wield than he had anticipated. He wants more chettier weapons like a sword or his old demon cleaver, but the old man, the certified weapon blocker, refuses. Azura's current body, he explains, is incapable of handling excessive force. He warns that if he tried swinging those big boy weapons around, he'd probably eat his own bones out of existence. However, once he masters the staff's techniques and learns how to channel his martial prowess properly, he will gain greater control over both its intensity and power transfer. As the old man imparts his wisdom, Azura, already exhausted, drifts into sleep in the cart. Meanwhile, in a nearby village, a scout from Fort Sovereign questions the locals about a cart, asking if they have seen it passing through. Just as he speaks, one villager, barely paying attention, casually points into the distance. The scout follows their gaze and immediately freezes, because there it is, the cart. Inside, just as described, is a young boy accompanied by an old man. A sudden wave of unease washes over the scout. Without wasting a moment, he swiftly sends a message to his group using a hawk. Can you believe we used to use hawks and pigeons to deliver messages? Imagine how many guys thought they got ghosted because the pigeon died on the way or just didn't deliver the message. Okay, sorry for that side thought. Anyway, back in front of Sanji, the Fort Sovereign group delivers an urgent report, informing him that the cart continues to vanish without a trace, leaving them with no leads on its exact whereabouts. Even after searching, there is no sign of the cart. This does not sit well with Sanji, who finds it impossible to believe. He begins to suspect that the group is deliberately feeding him false information to humiliate him. The tension in the air grows thick as the group members become visibly anxious for their lives. Just in time, the scout's hawk arrives, delivering new intel. The message is quickly relayed to Sanji that their scout has located the targets heading toward Moon Valley and is already in pursuit. Hearing this, Sanji issues a chilling warning to them that if they allow the Outlanders to escape again, he will personally remind them why he is known as the Blood Beast. The group, now even more terrified, agrees without hesitation. Meanwhile, in the distance, the cart slowly moves along a narrow mountain trail. After some time, the old man brings it to a stop in front of a long staircase leading down the mountain. He instructs Azura to rest while he goes ahead to check the path. Azura attempts to argue, but the old man silences him and begins descending. Now left behind, Azura finds himself growing bored as he lies on the cart. He can't help but think about Sally the Salamander, missing his old companion dearly. Rest in peace, you absolute legend. Just as he is lost in thought, the steed suddenly shakes. Looking up at one of the nearby trees, Azura notices a pair of small eyes peering at him from the branches. His heart skips a beat as he immediately recognizes it as Sally. Overcome with excitement, he shouts its name, causing the creature to leap from the tree and take off running. Without a second thought, Azura bolts after it, calling out for his steed to wait for him. Meanwhile, deeper in the forest, the Fort Sovereign group carries Sanji on their shoulders. As they continue their march, they spot their scout waiting in the distance. Sanji expects that the cart has vanished once again, but the scout assures him that they have crossed this point, though what happens afterward remains unknown. Frustrated, Sanji smacks his men, signaling them to lower him down. As they do, he takes a moment to summarize the situation. He questions whether they have all been sent by the Abyssal Beast to accompany him in hunting down the Outlanders responsible for killing the Crimson Beast. Nervously, they confirm it. Sanji knows the Abyssal Beast would not trouble him with ordinary matters, which means these Outlanders have to be formidable. Assessing the situation, he concludes that the Fort Sovereign men lack the necessary sense of urgency to complete their mission. With cold disdain, Sanji calls them aimless pigs incapable of accomplishing their task. One of the men attempts to apologize, but Sanji cuts him off, declaring that instead of meaningless apologies, he will teach them a lesson in urgency himself. He reveals his twisted intent that he will hunt them through the woods like a vengeful predator, and anyone who manages to survive the next hour will be allowed to live. Let's be honest, he just needs an excuse to kill. According to him, the survivors will gain a valuable lesson about urgency. Without hesitation, he begins the hunt. One of the men, trembling, asks if this is some kind of test. Annoyed, Sanji strikes in an instant, slicing their leader in half. The others stand frozen with their eyes wide in horror, struggling to process what has just happened. Before they can react, Sanji declares once again that the hunt is on. That is all it takes for panic to set in, and they scatter, running for their lives. Sanji watches them all with a predator's gaze before taking a deep breath and launching into the chase, hunting them down one by one, stalking them through the trees like helpless prey. My man is speedrunning murder like it's some newly released indie game. Not far away, Azura, wandering through the same area, hears the commotion. However, Azura soon realizes that the creature he was chasing wasn't Sally at all, it was just a random squirrel. Disappointed, he sighs, having hoped even for a moment that it might have been his lost companion. Elsewhere, in front of a massive tree, the old-timer stands at its entrance. Stepping inside, he finds a towering treant with large, curved horns resting within. The treant senses his presence immediately, recognizing him as an emissary. With a deep, ancient voice, he commends the old-timer for making it this far, noting that the place is surrounded on all sides by an impenetrable labyrinth. In response, the old-timer pulls out a pocket watch, revealing that he had considered discarding it long ago. It was an old, inoperable relic, but he had kept it, as one never knows when something might prove useful. Upon seeing it, the treant identifies it as the compass of time and space. The old-timer confirms this, remarking that he knew a keeper of the woods would recognize such an artifact. However, the treant admits that he has grown old and his spirit force has long since scattered throughout the forest. His physical form is nothing more than an empty shell. But the old-timer is undeterred. He knows that the treant's bark holds the power to breathe new life into the forest and insists that it must be recovered. Hearing this, the treant laments that he has spent centuries protecting these woods, and now, when it is finally his time to rest, the old-timer still seeks to use him. The old-timer pauses for a few moments before responding. He proposes a deal that if the treant provides him with valuable information, he will consider granting him eternal peace. The old-timer then asks about the whispers of the forest, the ancient stories the trees have carried for generations. He inquires whether the treant has ever heard of someone with the power to bring the dead back to life. At this, the treant's memories stir. He recalls the fort's sovereign leader, who once served as an emissary himself. Hearing this, the old-timer's expression sharpens, as if he already knows exactly who the treant is speaking of. Deep in the forest, Sanji finishes off his last prey, brutally smashing the man's body against a rock. As he looks at the remains, he acknowledges the man's skill. Unlike the others who died while fleeing, this one had managed to conceal himself within the rocks. However, despite controlling his breath and every movement, his heartbeat ultimately betrayed his position. With his latest target dealt with, Sanji scans the area with his sharp senses, picking up the faintest disturbance in the jungle. He listens intently, attuning himself to the movement of the wind and the rustling of the grass. The moment his final target steps forward, Sanji pinpoints his location. Without hesitation, he leaps into the air and flashes toward the sound at blinding speed, zipping through the woods like a phantom. Just as he is about to strike, he abruptly halts as his instincts force him to stop mid-attack. To his disbelief, the target he had been hunting is nothing more than a young boy. He stares in shock, unable to comprehend the situation. Meanwhile, Ashura couldn't care less. Arms crossed, he glared at Sanji and made it painfully clear that if he lost Sally again because of this nonsense, Sanji was going to pay for it. Sanji is momentarily taken aback, stunned by the sheer audacity of the boy. He double-checks, unsure if Azura is truly addressing him in such a manner, but before he can react, Azura scolds him, berating him for his lack of respect for the local wildlife. Without hesitation, he warns Sanji to shut up or risk being fed to the mushrooms. Sanji barely has time to process the bizarre threat before a hawk scoops in from nowhere and slashes him. The pain barely registers before another attack follows. A Fort Sovereign soldier emerges from the shadows, driving his sword straight through Sanji's back, piercing him through the chest. Azura watches in confusion as blood splatters across the forest floor, but to everyone's shock, Sanji does not fall. Instead, he calmly pushes the man away and with his own hands pulls the sword from his back. The Sovereign warrior, now panicked, begins pleading for mercy, capping that the attack was unintentional and that his hands merely slipped. But Sanji, with worms sprouting from his facial wounds, is excited, declaring that only this man has managed to pass his test. He offers him the position of his loyal hound, shocking him even more. Azura, observing all this, finds it strange that the sword had pierced the man's heart, yet he is still standing as if nothing happened. The warrior grows even more horrified as Sanji's eye fully recovers, with the worms mending the wound. Sanji claims that these little friends are the ones to whom he owes his immortality. He explains that, as a hound, he should be accustomed to seeing them, but the man suddenly points behind him, screaming that the person standing there is the one who killed the Crimson Beast. This shocks Sanji, while Ashura remains confused, unsure why the man is pointing at him and talking about something that sounds like cream. My man has the hearing of my 85-year-old grandma. Sanji turns, enraged, realizing that the Crimson Beast was defeated by nothing more than a child. Azura, too, recalls his fight with Huang, but before he can process his thoughts, Sanji strikes him with a powerful attack, sending him crashing into the ground. Azura collides with a rock, blood spilling from his mouth. Guys, Azura took damage, and it's not even from his old timer. I think it's GG. As Sanji delivers his lightning-fast attack, the sovereign warrior watches in shock and disbelief. He is confused about what just happened, as before he even realized it, Sanji had already struck his target, sending him flying into a rock with a single blow. The impact is so powerful that it splits the rock open like a plowed field. Watching this unfold, a man understands that Sanji clearly has the upper hand, but he is puzzled by his sudden disappearance. Suddenly, a sharp cracking sound comes from behind him. As he turns, he is stunned to see the massive tree behind him breaking apart, with Sanji embedded in its trunk, blood spilling from his mouth. Sanji is injured and the reason becomes clear. When he struck Azura with his fist, Azura retaliated by counterpunching him in the face at the last moment, sending him crashing into the tree. Sanji is shocked that Azura did not move until the very last second, countering him with precise timing and accuracy. As he processes this, Azura rises from the rubble, also slightly injured. Emerging from the debris, he speculates that Sanji might be acquainted with Huang, noting that they seem to share an unusual way of introducing themselves. However, as Azura tries to steady himself, his mind suddenly becomes hazy and a sharp pain surges through his head. Seizing this as an opportunity, Sanji charges at him and swings his staff, but Azura effortlessly dodges by leaping to the side. This amazes Sanji, who quickly follows up with a knee strike. Azura blocks it with his hand guards, but the sheer force results in him getting forcefully installed into the nearest rock formation. Azura tightens his grip on Sanji's knee and with a sudden press, cracks the bone. Sanji winces in pain but acknowledges Azura's raw strength, comparing him to a raging bull. Without hesitation, Azura grabs Sanji by the neck and slams him headfirst into the rock. The sheer force of the impact causes the stone to crumble, and as Sanji lies pinned down, Azura unleashes a relentless barrage of punches, keeping him restrained with his other hand. Sanji takes the brutal hits, leaving his body battered and broken, while Azura finally pulls away, clutching his head as the headache overtakes him. This is due to the strain of using his powers. Just as he turns to leave, the sound of bones cracking stops him in his tracks. As he looks back, he is shocked to see Sanji standing once again while his body rapidly regenerates. The source of his recovery is the writhing worms inside him, repairing his injuries from within. As Sanji heals, he recalls the time when his leader, the Divine Physician, saved him. Once condemned and executed by the martial arts realm for his crimes, Sanji's body had been left to rot, consumed by maggots. But the Divine Physician intervened, transforming the very maggots that fed on him into a miraculous force of regeneration, allowing them to live within him as a reminder of his second chance at life. Returning to the present, Sanji stands fully healed, while Azura watches in disbelief. Hearing Sanji's story, Azura wonders if he is one of the so-called immortal beings, to which Sanji confirms. Without warning, Sanji swings and lands a powerful strike across Azura's face, momentarily catching him off guard. The impact sends Azura crashing into the ground. As he struggles to rise, coughing, Sanji acknowledges Azura's resilience, realizing that an ordinary opponent would have been finished with that single hit. In that moment, he also begins to understand how Huang was defeated by Azura. Meanwhile, Azura steadies himself and dismisses Sanji's attack as nothing more than a trick, calling out his worms as mere weapons. This revelation stuns Sanji, wondering how Azura knows about his secret art. Azura reveals that Sanji is not the only one with so-called hidden techniques. In fact, compared to others he has encountered, Sanji's ability is insignificant. These words enrage Sanji, and he immediately fires a beam attack aimed directly at Azura's head. However, it strikes only his illusion. The real Azura swiftly dodges and charges towards Sanji, calling him weak. Sanji retaliates with a wild swing, generating a massive blast, but Azura backs away just in time, evading the attack. As he observes Sanji's movements, he finds it unsettling that Sanji is using two worms, one on each arm, to lash at him like whips. Determined to balance the fight, Azura removes the scarf from his neck and wraps it around his hand, stating that he should have ended this battle before things became so grotesque. But as he secures the scarf, he notices something strange happening to Sanji. His body trembles violently, and suddenly, a swarm of snakes erupts from his back, writhing and twisting. In mere moments, the snakes extend into long tentacles. Oh boy, there's always a final form, isn't there? Azura stands his ground as the snakes extend into the air before suddenly launching toward him with incredible speed. Upon impact, they create massive explosions as their sheer power tears through the battlefield. Though Azura manages to evade most of the attacks, another wave follows immediately. The tentacle-like appendages come within inches of striking him, but with a single swing of his scarf, he slices through them effortlessly. Despite cutting down several, Azura quickly realizes that fighting an entire swarm at once is no easy task. So he coils his scarf around the writhing mass, pinning them down before unleashing a relentless flurry of punches. The force of his blows is so intense that the ground shatters beneath him, rupturing into fragments. As the dust settles, the worms lie scattered on the ground. However, they quickly begin regenerating just as Sanji does. Azura watches in shock as the creatures prepare to attack once again. He wonders whether he should cut them all down at once and decides to go all in against these monstrous tendrils. But as he focuses, his eyes starts lagging, distorting his vision. Seizing the opportunity, the worms strike. Azura narrowly evades the attack by leaping into the air. As he jumps back, one of the worms catches up to him, nearly slicing him in half. He barely manages to dodge by ducking at the last second. Another follows, wrapping tightly around his arm, but with sheer force, he rips it apart using only his strength. However, before he can react, he notices more of them already coiling around his legs. Suddenly, Azura is lifted into the air and yeeted into the ground with immense force. The impact buries him deep within the earth, but before he can recover, another devastating attack follows, creating a massive explosion that pushes him further into the depths of the abyss. Meanwhile, the Fort Sovereign man stands in stunned silence, watching the battle unfold. Observing Sanji's immense power, the man realizes that if Sanji is this formidable, then the strength of the 8 protectors, whom no one has ever seen, must be unimaginable. Sanji possesses remarkable martial prowess despite lacking extraordinary techniques or specialized skills, yet he still fights with overwhelming ferocity and strength. He does not wield a weapon, but his mastery over his own limbs, using them as swords and spears, allows him to unleash deadly, unrelenting attacks. No one has ever witnessed Sanji's whip technique in person until today. The Fort Sovereign man watches Sanji recovers, wields his whip, and attacks with a near-maniacal intensity. The sight was both supernatural and monstrous, but what truly shocks him is the realization that no one has ever forced Sanji into this form before. This thought unsettles him, and he silently hopes it is not the case. Just as this dread settles over him, Azura crashes face first into the ground right in front of him with his body appearing lifeless. Hesitant but summoning his courage, the Fort Sovereign man picks up his sword, preparing to take action. However, before he can make a move, he hears Azura gasp for air. As Azura lifts his head, he sees the man poised to strike but is interrupted by Sanji's voice. Sanji, impressed that Azura is still breathing, acknowledges his resilience. He realizes that Azura's flesh is unnaturally sturdy, seemingly indestructible. Sanji thanks him for the experience, for now he understands what it's like to fight an annoyingly persistent enemy, just like himself. But the lesson is over, and he intends to end it once and for all. With a surge of power, Sanji sends his tentacles barreling toward Azura with overwhelming force. The Fort Sovereign man, standing directly in their path, screams in terror, but before he can react further, Azura swiftly uses his scarf to snatch the man's sword. In an instant, he unleashes a flurry of rapid swings, slashing through the oncoming tentacles. His strikes are so fast and powerful that he cleaves multiple tendrils in half. Sanji stares in utter disbelief. He cannot comprehend how his monstrous appendages were severed so effortlessly by a mere sword. Azura, with a sharp pull, retrieves the blade once more, while Sanji remains frozen in shock, struggling to process what just happened. Gripping the sword tightly, Azura fixes his gaze on Sanji and declares that his time is up. He should prepare to die. Oma Wamu Shindiru.